68 degrees. It's the number on the thermostat in his hallway, and nobody in the house can remember the last time anyone changed it. It's also the number behind the answer he gives whenever someone asks how he's doing. Fine. One word. A setting no one adjusts anymore. 7 in the evening, he comes home, hangs up his coat, walks past that little box on the wall, lifts a hand to nudge it half a degree, and then doesn't. Leaves it exactly where it was. From the kitchen, a voice asks how his day went. He answers before the question has even reached him. Fine. Not because he's good at faking it. Because he's left it there so long that even he has forgotten the number can be moved. And the strangest part isn't that the people in his house stopped caring. It's that they stopped asking. Because the gauge always reads the same. Most people assume a man who says he's fine is a man who's fine, or at worst, a man who's hiding something. But for this man, fine isn't an answer anymore. It's the way he turns the conversation down to its lowest setting the moment it starts to warm up. What he thinks of as politeness, as not wanting to be a bother, is actually the thing that has quietly taught everyone who loves him not to ask twice. And here's what's really happening under the surface. Every time that word comes out that fast, he isn't closing the door on his own sadness. He's closing the door on anyone walking in. Nobody is born answering fine before they've had time to think. It's a trained reflex, and it gets trained early. A boy falls off his bike, scrapes his whole knee open, and the first thing he learns isn't that it's okay to cry when it hurts. It's how relieved the grown-ups look when he says he's not hurt. He watches his father's face relax. He watches his mother turn back to whatever she was doing. Nobody teaches him this in words. They teach him with faces, with the way the whole room warms up when he says he's fine, and cools down when he tells the truth. A child reads that faster than any lesson at school. He understands, in the way a child understands everything, that saying, "I'm okay," is a gift he can hand to other people, and that handing over that gift gets him love, gets him peace. 30 years later, the boy is a man sitting in a doctor's office, holding a sheet of results in his hands, and the first thing he thinks isn't that he's afraid. It's how to word it tonight so the family won't worry. The old reflex still runs, only the weight has changed. At 7, it covered a scraped knee. Now it covers a number on a lab report, a debt he hasn't told anyone about, a fear of getting old he hasn't dared to name even to himself. Same sentence, same one word, and the only thing that changes is that what it has to cover gets heavier every year. He isn't broken. He's doing exactly what a boy who got praised for doing it well grew up to do for a living. It's just that nobody told him there would be a bill, and that the bill gets paid a little at a time, in places he never looks. The first layer you could call the baseline. In a house, the thermostat gets set to one number and left there, and after a few months, nobody feels that number anymore. It becomes normal, the floor that everything else happens on top of. A man does the exact same thing to himself. He sets himself to fine and leaves it there, year after year, until he loses the ability to know how he actually feels. There's a night he sits on the edge of the bed after the house has gone to sleep, and his wife asks if something's wrong, and he says no, he's fine. And the frightening part is that he isn't lying. He genuinely doesn't know. The feeling inside him has sat at that setting so long, it no longer sends a signal he can read. Try this. Ask a man like that when the last time was that he felt happy. Really happy. Not satisfied, not relieved, but happy. And watch how long he goes quiet. Not because there's no answer. Because the number has held one spot so long he forgot it ever changed. That isn't the heaviest layer. Underneath the baseline, there's something quieter. The second sign happens not inside him, but between him and the people he lives with. It's the moment they stop checking. When a gauge reads the same number for years, people stop looking at it. Not because they're lazy, because they trust it. His wife used to ask, back when they were first married, and she asked because she meant it, "Is there anything you want to say?" He said, "No, everything's fine." She asked again, a few more times over a few years, and every time she got the same reading. Then one day she stopped asking, not because she stopped loving him, because he had taught her, through his own consistency, that there was nothing here to read. And the painful part is that he'll blame her for it. He'll think, if only she'd paid closer attention. But she did pay attention, for years, until he finally convinced her she didn't need to. And beneath that silence between two people, there's a wider ring. The third layer spreads out past the walls of his house, out to where he becomes the one everyone stops worrying about. At work, he's the guy who never complains. So when the cuts come, his support gets pulled first, because he can take it. In the old circle of friends, he's the one who checks in on everyone else, who shows up when someone needs him, so it never occurs to anyone to ask him back, because when has he ever needed anything? There's a night he goes out for drinks with 3 men he's known for 20 years, laughs the loudest at the table, pays before anyone can reach for the check, drives each of them home. On the way back alone, the road empty, he realizes that all night not a single question landed on him. And the strange thing is, he isn't angry. He finds it normal, like the weather. That's the frightening part. He sits in a room full of people who are fond of him, and not one of them, through no malice at all, knows that the past week was a very long one for him. He has built, with his own steadiness, a world where he's the last person anyone thinks of when they ask themselves who might need to be asked. That's the strangest loneliness there is, the kind that happens in the middle of a crowd that loves you, and it doesn't stop with him. The 4th sign is the one that makes this heavier than a single life. He has a son, and one afternoon the 10-year-old comes home, eyes red from something that happened at school, and he kneels down and asks what's wrong. The boy takes a breath, blinks, and says, "I'm okay, Dad. I'm fine." And he nods, feels the relief wash through him, and says, "Good, that's my boy." He has just accepted the exact gift he once handed his own father, without realizing he's just taught his son how to wrap it. That setting doesn't live in one person. It gets handed down, quietly, from a tired man to a boy learning how to be a man, through the very moment that looks like the tenderest one. And nobody in that chain is a villain. That's the hardest part to accept. The fine, in the beginning, was a kind thing. It came to protect, to keep a boy from adding to the grown-up's load, to let a man keep his house warm without making anyone carry his share. For years it did exactly that. But a number held in one place too long, the dial seizes. There comes a point where, even when he wants to tell the truth, wants to let someone in, he tries to turn it and it won't move, because it stood in one spot for 30 years. Maybe he tried once. Some night he opened his mouth to tell his wife something real, and the words caught halfway up his throat, and what came out instead was the old line, "I'm fine, get some sleep, early start tomorrow." It wasn't that he didn't want to, it's that the mechanism had run on its own so long it was faster than his own will. He stood there knowing he'd just missed a door, and couldn't understand why he was the one who closed it. The thing that once saved him is now the very thing standing between him and every hand that could reach him. And here's what needs to be said plainly. The problem isn't that he needs to get better at enduring loneliness. He's gotten so good at that, it's killing him slowly. The problem is that the dial can be turned, and he's the only one left who can turn it. The way out isn't to stop saying fine. Sometimes fine is true, and not everyone needs to know everything. The way out is to let his setting become adjustable again, for a few people, in a few moments. The first thing, He needs to see that his fine isn't a fact, it's a habit. The word doesn't describe how he is. It only describes what he's used to doing with the question. He can remind himself of something else before he answers. This comes out to protect the person asking, not to say anything about me. Just noticing that gap is enough. That one time in 10, he stops for half a second and actually asks himself what setting he's at before he reads someone the old number. Second, he doesn't need to throw everything open. He just needs to turn it 1 degree. A man is afraid of telling the truth because he thinks telling the truth means dumping all of it, becoming a burden, the very thing he's spent his life avoiding. But nobody said he has to tell all of it. The next time someone he trusts asks how he's doing, he can say something 1 notch below fine and 1 notch truer. Honestly, a little worn out lately, but I'm okay, that's all. 1 degree. He'll find the ceiling doesn't fall. He'll find the other person doesn't run. He'll find, maybe for the first time in years, that someone goes quiet and looks at him a second longer. The third thing, and maybe the hardest, is that he has to let himself be the one who gets asked, not only the one who asks. His whole life he's kept the temperature steady for other people, and he's so good at it he believes that's the only place he has. But a man who only knows how to give and never lets himself receive isn't stronger than anyone. He's just alone in a more polite way. He can tell himself that letting someone worry about him a little isn't being a burden to them. It's giving them the very thing he's always given them, the feeling of being needed. The people who love him don't want a machine that runs quietly. They want him. Maybe some night he'll walk past that thermostat in the hallway, and this time he'll actually turn it, move it 1 degree, and leave it at the new spot. A gesture so small no one in the house notices. But he'll know. The number still moves. It was never broken. It's just that no one has touched it in a long time. The quiet he's carried all these years isn't a flaw that needs fixing. It's proof of how long he's been keeping other people warm. But keeping people warm was never supposed to mean disappearing. Men have handed this locked setting to one another across more generations than anyone can count, each one thinking he was the first. None of them ever told the dial could turn. He can't undo a line that long in one night. But he can be the man in that line who stops, puts his hand on the dial, and leaves the boy who's watching him something other than what he was handed. If one line in this reached you, leave a single line below. Just one is enough. Because right now there's probably another man reading it who needs to know he isn't the only one standing at 68 degrees. You're not alone. You never were.